Scandals in the tennis world. Match fixing, corruption, under the table deals. There's been two big stories recently that have kind of flown under the radar. Juan Gabriel Castro, a tennis umpire from the Dominican Republic, has been handed a 6-year suspension and a €4,655 fine by the International Tennis Integrity Agency, or ITIA, after allegedly facilitating match fixing and corruption. So the ITIA has confirmed that Castro breached the Tennis Anti-Corruption Program, or TACP, 12 times. So this isn't a small issue. This guy seemed to be manipulating scoring entries during matches, helping rig scoreboards, and allowing corrupt betting activity to flourish. Apparently, it was said that he was involved in 3 separate matches where he played a role in adjusting the scorecards to facilitate the corruption. Now here's the crazy part. Castro didn't even respond to the charges. He didn't appeal or defend himself, which is why the ITIA slapped him with a, quote, deemed sanction, meaning he automatically accepted his punishment without even putting up a fight. So he's now banned from officiating any ITA sanctioned events until November 2030. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think Juan Gabriel Castro is just one of many officials and players involved in match-fixing scandals in tennis. And honestly, I think the ITIA's response is a little too soft. We have to maintain fairness at all costs in tennis. We saw similar cases with Bulgarian official Pavel Atanasov and Venezuelan official Armando Belardi, both of whom received lifetime bans, and players like Aaron Cortez got a 15-year ban for fixing matches. How many of these individuals do you think are just the small fish? The tennis world is huge. It's a worldwide sport. People from almost every country play this sport. And I think these sanctions might only be scratching the surface of a much larger problem. If the ITIA is serious about cleaning up the game, they need to start making examples of people. 6 years? A fine? I mean, that's barely a dent in Castro's potential earnings. It doesn't seem like nearly enough to scare away potential future corrupt officials. And it can be so difficult to even pinpoint this corruption. It can be as simple as a player agreeing to double fault 3 or more times during a match. How are you able to tell whether someone is double faulting intentionally or not? I don't know. I don't even have the answer to that. But here's my hot take. If the ITIA really wants to protect the integrity of the sport, it's time for stricter penalties. And I mean lifetime bans, zero tolerance for even the slightest hint of corruption. A 6-year ban is a slap on the wrist for someone who manipulated matches for money. It's time for a real overhaul of how the sport deals with corruption. And this isn't the only story that we just saw recently. We recently saw 2 players, Joshua Muhire and Anna Litneva, who have just been handed suspension for corruption violations. And trust me, this story is a little more complicated than just 2 bans. So Rwandan tennis player Joshua Muhire, who's currently unranked, has been handed a suspension of 2.5 years after being found guilty of facilitating betting and fixing the outcome of a match he played in September 2023. Umpire denied the charges, but after an anti-corruption hearing in December, the verdict was clear. He'll be banned from playing, coaching, or even attending any tennis event sanctioned by the ITIA. This includes all major tournaments like the ATP and Slams. And then there's Anna Litneva, a Russian player who also ran into some serious trouble. Litneva has been found guilty of multiple breaches, including contriving match outcomes, facilitating a player not using their best efforts, conspiring to commit corruption, and even soliciting. Now, all of these violations relate to her activities in 2023. Unlike Muhire, Litneva didn't respond to the charges, which led to her being hit with a 12-month suspension and about a $4,000 fine. And like Muhire, she also faces a deemed sanction for not appealing, which means she pretty much accepted her fate without putting up a fight. Now, similarly to the umpire situation, I think these punishments, while significant, they don't feel like enough, especially when you consider the scale of corruption that's probably going on in tennis right now. These are just 2 players, and especially at the lower ranked level, how many other tennis pros and officials are out there facilitating corruption, betting, and fixing matches under the radar? I think the ITIA's response here is like trying to put a band-aid on a bullet wound. But let's be real. I think the sport could possibly be facing an integrity crisis. When a player like Joshua Muhair, who's not even ranked, can be involved in match fixing, it tells you that the problem isn't with the top players, but the lower levels. I'm sure some of you are aware that at the lower levels of these ATP events, the Futures, the Challengers, ITF Tour, things like that, it is borderline impossible to make a living. The majority of players outside of the top 100 don't even break even year to year. So how else are they supposed to make money? Well, corruption betting, match fixing. I'm sure it ends up being a solution for a lot of players, and it can even seem very enticing. So a great solution there might be paying those players a livable wage so they can afford to live and play the sport that they've played their whole life. I'm sure some of you big tennis fans saw those couple of articles that went viral claiming that tennis players receive the smallest revenue share among major sports. For perspective, tennis players typically receive about 17.5% of the total revenue generated by the sport, which is insanely low considering other professional leagues. For example, the NBA, players receive approximately 50% of the league's total revenue. Another model similar to that is the NFL and MLB, where players receive upwards of 50% of the league's total revenue. So as tennis generates a substantial amount of global revenue, especially through major tournaments like Wimbledon, the US Open, and the ATP and WTA tours, all the Masters 1000 events, all the ATP 500s, the ATP 250s, players get nearly nothing. You have all these massive tennis companies making all the money, and none of it going to the players, so players have to resort to other means to survive. And for someone like Muhair, a long suspension is tough, but is it really going to change the culture of corruption in tennis? And with Litnova, who didn't even respond to the charges, why is she getting away with a fine that's not even fully enforced? If the ITIA really wants to send a message that corruption will not be tolerated, they need to start dishing out harsher penalties. Lifetime bans for match fixers, no more half measures. Why not just cut the problem off at the root? Now, I'm sure some of you may bring betting into the conversation, and I'm fine with that. Go crazy in the comments, but think of it this way. Betting still needs to be in tennis. And why? I mean, I know it's controversial due to the potential for corruption. And as we see in these 2 stories, corruption happens. But betting still needs to stay. It adds financial support for the sport, more fan engagement, greater incentives for sponsorships, and a wider global reach. Betting needs to be carefully regulated, but it serves an important purpose in the tennis ecosystem. And when done correctly, it supports the integrity of the sport. Instead of eliminating betting, tennis should continue to embrace it while ensuring robust safeguards are in place to prevent corruption and match fixing. But what do you think? Are these suspensions enough, or do you think tennis needs to go harder on corruption? And what about the revenue split? Should players outside of the top 100 barely break even day to day? Or is that just the nature of the sport and what players have to deal with to make it big? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Hot Take Tennis, and ring that bell so you never miss an update on all the hottest takes. There were really only 2 interesting matches, that being Holger Rune, Talon Griekspoor, and Medvedev Fils. I thought the Jack Draper-Ben Shelton match was pretty underwhelming, and the Alcaraz-Cerundolo match pretty much went exactly as expected. So let's start off talking about Rune and Griekspoor. Griekspoor kind of came out firing, hitting that massive forehand that we all know he has, and just painting the lines left and right to just hit completely through Rune. And then there was a major drop-off in level from Talon Griekspoor. And Rune just capitalized on that, sealing the second set 6-0, and then kind of just ran away with the rest of the match. He was able to maintain a higher level, made more balls, and it was really on Griekspoor's racket the whole time, and he was just missing. Moving on to talk about Medvedev and Fils. This match was very strange. Medvedev played an extremely passive game style the whole time, which is somewhat what he's known for, but here's my take with Medvedev. He needs to be willing to take some returns early. I mean, he can't go and play every match returning 30 feet behind the baseline. That semifinal matchup is Holger Rune and Medvedev. I think that'll be pretty exciting. I think Holger Rune is going to pull through and take this match, and he'll be into his third Masters 1000 final. Now let's talk about the other half of the draw on the quarterfinals. We had Draper Shelton, which, to be honest, it was kind of just a unforced error mess on the Ben Shelton side. So Draper won that 6-4, 7-5, and he'll be playing, no surprise here, Carlos Alcaraz in the semi. What do I think is going to happen? This isn't really a hot take, but I think Alcaraz is just going to absolutely run through him. I think Draper's already tired. He's never made it this deep in a tournament this size before. I think he's going to fold to the pressure, and we're going to see a quick 2-set victory, maybe even something like a 2-3 victory. What do you think? You think Draper has what it takes to upset Alcaraz here? And what about Rune Medvedev? You think Medvedev is going to pull through even with his passive game style and take out Rune? I'm not sure, but I'm excited to see it.